Hello and welcome. I am Eric Stenlake from Energetic Life Now. Welcome to the Spanglish World and Her Networks on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores and iOS and Android devices. And while you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment, please. The app is free. Zingo TV can also be available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today. I am your host, Eric Stenlake, and it is my ultimate pleasure to welcome, first time ever here to the Energetic Life Show, is my dear friend, coach, and mentor, Kendra Richardson. Welcome, Kendra, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I am so happy to be here and grateful and honored to be here with you on your first show, and I cannot wait to chat. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Kendra has an amazing story, and for you, the viewers out there, I cannot wait for her to get into it. This is an incredible story of how someone experienced a really traumatic events and things that happened in her life, and how she went from that place of rock bottom, which if you're like me and the rest of us out there, we've all had those experiences in life. And Kendra's going to be sharing with us on how she was able to gain some momentum to move out of that space that took her down into a really dark place, and how she was able to then build out of that and become this amazing person that she was designed to be, to really explore the spaces of her leadership and doing some amazing things. And I don't want to spoil it anymore. So Kendra, oh my gosh, will you take us through a little bit about your background and get into a little bit about your story, because it is so powerful and so amazing, and we want to be able to share this with our listeners.
Oh, I would love to. And thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Coming into my story will take you back to Marin County, California. Just about 30 minutes north of San Francisco is where I grew up. And the long of the short of it is, I was born a very inquisitive, very curious soul. I was always really passionate about discovering what the truth of this life was, what was right, what was wrong, where I fit in, what the meaning of life was. And all of those different questions, really small questions for like a 7-year-old. So
Right?
That was how I began my journey. And, that just being my natural spirit kind of led me to start, exploring different types of studies and reading the Romantics and Thoreau and Emerson and all of these different people. And I won't bore you with all of the names, but basically, because I was such an inquisitive soul and also a highly sensitive soul, which is something I didn't even know was a term back in the days, but now, there are studies on the fact that this is a part of our gene makeup. Anyways, this is who I was as a young girl growing up. And as I got older, started to struggle like most of us do when we go through that kind of coming of age experience. And we start to build out our relationships, and those relationships sometimes get hurt. We have a different understanding of what the world looks like as we mature. And as I was going through this, like many of us do, I started to have my first struggles with, mental health, with emotional management. What do I do when I'm feeling really upset? And I'm so happy that the world is becoming a little bit more open to being vulnerable and sharing these kind of things. But when I was in school, this was not something that you would ask a teacher about. So because of that, I kind of slowly but surely just deeper and deeper went down into this hole of depression, and eventually found myself with severe depression. I was in therapy twice a week. I was going to see psychiatrists, some of which were telling my parents that I was bipolar. And keep in mind, this is me at 16 years old. So my parents are like, what do you mean she's bipolar? You've talked to her for 15 minutes. There must be something else here. So luckily, my parents helped me get help holistically, meaning that I never got on medication and I went to therapy instead. And I'll just fast forward, really working through that to the rock bottom moment that brought me there and kind of catapulted that journey from here to hitting the bottom to then upwards, as Eric is talking about. So I'll take you to my rock bottom moment. And when it was, I was probably maybe 17 and a half at the time, between 16 and 18 years old. And at this time, I was suffering with severe depression. I was self-harming, and I was also suffering with disordered eating. And so these were just kind of playing a vicious cycle, right? Because if you're not nourished and you're not eating, your mental health isn't going to be great either, all of the things. And so I can remember so vividly, I had just binge ate and I was purging myself. And I was self-harming at the same time because I was upset with myself for purging and, you know, just telling myself, you're disgusting, you're worthless. How could you do this? Like, oh my gosh. And really feeling like I was going crazy and the voices in my head were so sharp and different and this and that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. And I remember having this moment of recognition that if I continued doing the behaviors that I was doing, I not only was going to lose myself, but I was going to lose every single person that I loved in my life. And I experienced what can only be described as an out-of-body moment where I physically was looking at myself from above. And I know now and believe now that that was my intuition or my higher self, like physically, right? My higher self looking down at me and realizing that I needed to make a change because there was more for me out there. Even if I couldn't feel it in that moment, there was more for me. And so that moment really was the catalyst of me realizing there's more for me. I am not just a human body, but I'm also a spirit. There is some sort of divinity that lives inside me. And so from that moment forward, I went outside, I started eating again. And that really began my healing journey. Of course, growth isn't linear. There were ups and downs throughout it as that progressed. But that really set me on a discovery journey. I volunteered in multiple countries around the world. I lived in Ecuador for a year, and along those journeys, I was not just serving human beings and seeing the literal divinity within them, but I was also meeting guides that were helping me work through and take off all of those wounds that I had carried and picked up over the years that were just blocking my true magic and my true divinity. And so through the combination of that, all of these things continue to prove to me that, oh my gosh, the divine lives inside each and every single one of us. And it's just the constructs of some pieces of our society and these experiences we have that block us from believing that and feeling that and being able to tap into that. And so my mission now is to help as many people as I possibly can rediscover that and awaken the divine within them so that they can live a life of flow and fulfillment and purpose, and all of the amazing things that I know all of us are craving. Because why? Because we're divine. So that's just a little blip of my story.
Wow, that's amazing. That really is. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable to share that with all of us. You know, I kind of want to go back, if we can, just to that time period where you were talking about around 7, 8 years old, right? Where you began to begin experiencing some pain in transition of life, right? And you know, I think it's becoming more and more aware of kids that struggle with transitions, right? And so, you know, myself and I work with the kind of tween to 25 group. And so many times parents will come and say, listen, my kid's struggling in this area. What can we do in that? And I love the fact that you kind of got to that place where your parents really stepped in and said, we've got to do something here for our daughter, right? And
Mhm.
and really get into how and where and what can we do. And it's that space between that kind of 7, 8 years old and the time that you kind of were getting some help and support. What was that time frame? I'm curious on that. Like, what was that space of time frame for you?
In terms of me getting support, I was going to therapy twice a week. So I was going once a week by myself, and then once a week I was in group therapy. I'm not sure if I think that was your question, but was it geared towards something else too?
Yeah, like what age did you begin that process? Was it pretty early on, like when you started experiencing some challenges in that 7, 8 years old, or was it older, kind of into the early teens?
Yeah, it was definitely in my early teens. So
Yeah,
when I was younger, I think probably I wouldn't have gotten to that darkest point if maybe there was some more attention and intention around the kind of spirit that I had and helping me cultivate that and grow in that way.
yeah,
And I know that my parents did absolutely everything that they could and what they knew how to do. And we're always getting better as we, are aging with the generations that we hope to do. So because of that, that was part of the reason I continued down the dark hole. And then I didn't get help until my mom actually found like me self-harming myself. She saw
right.
some, things of that. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of ironic, Kendra, in that we hear so much of this from parents going, I had no idea that my kid was hurting, or I didn't know this harm was going on, or that they were internally struggling until there's some sort of magnitude that reveals itself, if you will, right? And I can remember vividly, walking into my son's room and finding him self-harming himself a number of years ago, and I can only imagine how scared your parents were to be in that space, because I know it absolutely terrified me. And and I think parents, if you're out there or you have family members within your family unit, or friends that that you're looking at, and you're like, in the back of your mind, it's like there's these little telltale signs that maybe we're not cluing into. And you said it best a minute ago. It's that intuition, right? And so parents and family and people around the world, if you have that intuition, if you feel that, kind of at the pit of your stomach, that something is not right, trust that intuition, trust that gut sense to really get in there and say, listen, something's going on here. Can we begin exploring, what that is? Can we begin to find some help and support for this person? Because we know what it looks like on the far end of that scale, and unfortunately, for some kids that we see, it becomes too late. And thank God that you know you're here and sharing this powerful message, right? And so now let's get into into that teen space. You've had that opportunity to get support, to get help. How was any of that part harder or easier? And please, answer what you're willing and able to on this, because I don't want to put you in a bad place, if you will. um what were some of maybe the bigger challenges as you were starting to get help, and how did that show up, if you will?
yeah, definitely. I love that question. I will share two of the biggest obstacles that I experienced, and one of which is more of a mental and spiritual obstacle, and the other is more of like a physical obstacle. So the spiritual and mental obstacle for me, and I believe that it's similar for a lot of people that struggle with this, is kind of going back to what I mentioned in my story earlier. As I went down and down, and my mental health went down and down, I actually started to believe that I was crazy for feeling sadness, for kind of having random, kind of sometimes seemingly crazy thoughts, right? And I've come to believe in recent years, from studying very successful people and through my own experiences, that I honestly believe the most important thing in the world is confidence and self-love. And the biggest enemy to every single human being is shame, especially when it's self-shame. And so that was honestly the biggest obstacle for me, was the shame that I carried around who I thought I was and what I thought those behaviors and thoughts in my head meant about me. Now that I got to learn about the brain, I've learned that, you know, we have an animalistic lower part of our brain that's always going to be firing off as if a literal animal would. And we don't have to feel weird or wrong for having those thoughts. So I would say shame was the biggest obstacle, and also a huge obstacle with me seeking help, because I didn't tell my parents for years. And luckily, my parents never caught me in the act, but my mom, you know, I actually would harm myself right underneath where my swimsuit would be. So she didn't find out until one time we were camping and I was wearing a swimsuit and she saw. But even like you were talking about earlier, with sometimes there being signs, one of my signs was the fact that when I was a young girl, now again today, now that I'm healed and I don't have all that stuff on top of me, I'm a super duper free spirit. Like, I don't know if I can say this on TV, but I'd pretty much be naked in front of everyone. Like, I am super duper free spirit. But when I was struggling with this, my mom told me that she was like, I always thought it was weird that you kept all of a sudden closing your door all the time. Like, you never wanted your door open. You wanted, and that, if that isn't just a physical manifestation of shame, I don't know what is, right? Like, I didn't want people to see me anymore. I was so like covered up. So I would say shame was the biggest mental and spiritual barrier. And then the biggest physical barrier, I believe, was just making the shift of discovering interrupt tools that were resourceful for me in dealing with pain and negative states that I wanted to get out of, and I wanted to change, because it's totally natural. We're human beings. When we're experiencing pain, we're gonna want to get out of that. And for me, my way to get out of pain was to cut myself. That was a pattern interrupt, right? It changed my physical state because it released adrenaline, all the things. And so, of course, that's not a resourceful pattern interrupt, but it is. And so the only thing that I had to learn was, number one, oh, that's what you're doing. You're trying to interrupt your pattern. And number two, look at all these other beautiful and loving ways that you can also interrupt your pattern, which was something that I didn't know growing up. So those were the two biggest obstacles, and both of them, kind of as I chatted through, can definitely be overcome. I don't know, Eric, if you have some ideas on how you've dealt with that with your son and with yourself, or if you felt different barriers that you want to share.
Yeah, you know what? Thank you so much for bringing up the pattern interrupts, because you know that is something that I have learned, and I wish I had learned when I was a kid, because I have my own struggles. I mean, I don't know any kids that don't have struggles in some way, shape, or form, going through those tough childhood into puberty years. But for me, in those pattern interrupts, is really identifying, you know, why I'm thinking that way, why I'm feeling that way, and then begin to shift myself from the story that is looping in my head to come to the truth realization of that loop being not true. And when I make that connection, because I understand the why of the feelings behind it, man, that just takes such a huge weight off me, because now it's like I'm not sitting in that feeling that is bringing me down and holding me down and weighing me down, that I can now break from that and say, no, that is not a true, or here's how I can get that reversal of that and go from that negative into that positive, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we see people all the time. Well, how you doing? I'm fine, right? And they're trudging along through life. But what happens when they awaken that internal spirit, right? That you've been talking about. And now it's that waking up and they're saying, man, I feel fantastic. I feel amazing.
Mhm.
Right. And that really starts at the beginning of the day. Would you agree on that one?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, 1000%. Um, I also just wanted to share before we move on, because I noticed Eric and I both are a part of the neuroencoding team. So we share a bit of terminology, and I wanted to just bring it back to our audience, maybe like a practical tool around what this pattern interrupt looks like. So I shared with myself a negative pattern interrupt was obviously me self-harming. But a more positive, right? There's always a scale. The more positive pattern interrupt that I learned in therapy was to snap a rubber band on my wrist. And now that I learned from neuroencoding other pattern interrupts, there are ones that are even more resourceful as that as well. And I don't know if you want to share one, Eric, or if you have another question that you want to segue into, but I just wanted to make sure that we gave our audience like something practical that they take away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kendra and I have learned through studying with Dr. Joseph McClendon III in the Neuroencoding Institute is something called the stop technique. And so as these feelings creep up, or these inner voices or inner vision that is painting a picture, or that voice that's not true, we learn to kind of put your hand up, and we're going to stop that right here, right? And I'm going to identify what that feeling is. I'm really angry right now. Well, what am I angry about? And identifying that, right? And for me, that's the S. Say what it is. The T, take a deep breath. If I need to do a couple more, I'm going to keep doing those deep breaths until I get some more blood flow going to my brain, get that blood out of that emotional center of the brain, the reptilian brain, back into the prefrontal cortex where my thinking and reasoning can take place. And after that, take a deep breath part of the T. Now I'm thinking about my outcome. What do I want? How is this aligning with the direction that I'm going? Is it in that situation? Is it with that relationship? It could, come about in a lot of different ways. It could be aligned with maybe a goal that I'm trying to accomplish. But what's my outcome? What do I want? And then we do this great activity that Kendra and I both absolutely love, which is to put your hand up in the air and bend at the elbow, turn your hand and reach around the back and pat yourself on the back. And so that P would be the praise, right? The P is the praise, and praise myself, pat yourself on the back and say, good job. That was great. Because now I am learning how to take those negative thoughts and emotions and stop them before they become bigger than what they are. I mean, have you ever had a thought that just you didn't stop it, and it just looped for hours and hours, and it began to build and build and build and build. And what eventually happens is we have this what? Emotional volcano explosion. And it usually, for me, it doesn't work out so well. I don't know about you, Kendra, but what if I began to shift that and rewire my brain to think of in the positive? And if I began stacking that positives and stacking those truths, eventually I'm going to have that explosion. And it's really a gratitude rampage, if you will. It's a joy explosion, because now I'm in that space where I get to control the outcomes. I get to have that power behind that emotions to take that and understand where I am within that space, and not give the power and the energy to that negative, but bring in that goodness and that love and that joy and that fulfillment, and have that be what is exploding out.
Oh my gosh, so good. I could like feel the joy and the fulfillment in your voice as you were saying it there towards the end. I love that so much. And I just wanted to touch on what you mentioned about the stacking, because the stacking can go either way, right? Like with the rock bottom, the stacking goes down and then you hit the rock bottom, or you can stack up and stack your positivity. And you mentioned before we went on this tangent, something about morning routines. And that made me think about just the importance of starting your day stacking that positivity from the inside out right away. And I know I used to be guilty of, checking my social media in the morning or looking at the news outlets in the morning. And I just 1 month decided that I wasn't going to do that. And for the first 15 minutes of my day every day, it was going to be me time, meaning that I'm talking with my spirit, I'm meditating, I'm, dancing, I'm listening to music, I'm moving my body, whatever it is, but I'm getting to express before I have external environments coming at me and basically feeding me what I should be thinking and feeling in the moment. And instead giving myself the opportunity to say, hey, who am I today? What do I feel like today? What's going on in my body? What's going on in my mind? What's going on in my spirit? And a lot of the times that's where our creativity comes out, is because we don't have these external sources coming at us. And so just a tip there, if you can take even 5 to 15 minutes at the start of your day for yourself to really set the stage for what's this day going to look like? Who am I going to be today? Tell yourself those affirmations, and then if that's what gets you pumped up, put on that pump up song if that feels better for you, whatever it is. And if you really want to overachiever, which is definitely Eric, you might even do this the night before. You might even, right before you go to bed, think about, what do I want my day to look like tomorrow? What do I want to feel like tomorrow? So then you're actually igniting that and creating that as you sleep. Wake up with that already familiar to you. It's not something that you have to get to know. You just already have that feeling that it's going to be a good day.
Oh, I so love that, Kendra. Thank you for sharing about that rise routine. And you touched a bit on the rest routine too, is how am I closing out my night? And I love that. I love being in that space to say, what was great about today?
Yes.
Am I journaling that? Am I thinking about that? What am I celebrating? The great things that happened today? What great things are going to happen tomorrow?
Right.
And then, wow, and you're waking up the next day already in gratitude from the day before? Holy smokes.
Totally.
Because I'll tell you what, Kendra, I'll tell you what, there are days where I wake up and I say, oh my Lord, I'm waking up already tired today. Anybody else out there be in that space? You're already tired tomorrow and it's 6 a.m. today. And you're like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get through this today? That's when I really, really got to stop myself and get into that routine and say, wait, there is so much to be grateful for, so much to be thankful for. Yeah.
I love that so much. And I was just going to add as well, because you were talking about how amazing it is to really capitalize and ground and anchor these positive experiences that we had during the day. And I'm just thinking about a viewer out there thinking, but what if I had a terrible day, Eric and Kendra? Okay, what am I going to do that night then? And what you can do when you have a terrible day is still create and anchor goodness out of it. And how you can do that is asking yourself, what did I learn and what did I gain even from these painful experiences? And even if you don't know the answer to that yet, you can assign your own meaning to it. You can choose what you want to take away from the experience. So if you're out there and you're like, I had a terrible day, what do I do at night? you can journal on your experience and then pull out little insights that you gained and realize that those are really a gift for the next stage of your evolution. Tomorrow, you can be a better person because of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful and beautifully said, Kendra. You know, I have been thinking a lot lately about when this happens in our lives. Sometimes I think of this as we fall into pits in our life, if you will, right? And how devastating is it for us when we fall into a pit? We panic. We don't know what to do. We get into that pit. And rather than, and pictorially, I'm seeing this in my mind. What if you sat down in that pit and began to be grateful that you're still here? You're in the pit. You know it's tough. You know it's hard, but you're still here and you're still surviving and you're going to get out of that pit. And I begin reflecting upon, okay, what led me to get into this pit? Was it by accident? Oopsie. Okay, now I know not to do that again. Was this intentional in some way, subconsciously or consciously, that led me into that pit? Taking that time really to reflect on me. And I love the word you use, gift. It is a gift. It is a gift of that self-reflection. So the next time, viewers, you find that you're in a pit of life, if you will, sit down, look around, understand why you're in there. You're going to get out because you survived 100% of every hard day and challenging day you've gone through up until today. So there's nothing that is going to tell you you're not going to get out of that pit.
I love that so much. And I love that you mentioned, reflecting on the fact that you have made it out of the pit all of those times before.
Yeah.
Because when we don't feel confident in the moment, guess what we can do? We can borrow confidence from a former self of ourselves. Even if it was you when you were 7 years old and you were driving with the windows down by the beach and you felt confident and free, you can borrow that. Guess what? That's still yours. You still own it. That was your experience.
That's it.
And so sometimes it just takes remembering how strong we are and how much we've actually been through. And in addition to that, something that can be helpful for me when I'm in the pit and I'm going through a hard time is asking myself and reflecting on the question of, when I've been in a pit before and I've gone through a really painful experience, what came out of that painful experience? What was on the other side of that painful experience? And I invite everyone watching to ask themselves that as well. And maybe you want to journal on it tonight. And I can 99.99999% guarantee that you, like me, will find that every single painful experience you had has been a gift to propel the next stage of your spirit's evolution. Because in every painful experience, we are given a challenge that the highest good, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, spirit that lives within all of us, that spirit's telling you this challenge, when you move through it, you're going to have the keys to the next stage of your life. And so this is a gift for you to be able to gain those keys. And so often reflecting on past experiences with that as well can be helpful, because then you prove it to yourself right there. Like, oh my gosh, this isn't even a guess anymore. Now I'm identifying patterns, and I know every time I experience pain, it might feel like a little bit of a death, but what's going to come after that is the rebirth and the reemergence into something better and more beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm thinking back to a recent conversation that we had about, we're walking up and we see this pit. How often in life we just look at that pit and we don't stop ourselves, we fall in, right? And so getting to that place where you're looking at the pit going, this is terrible, this is horrible. And you asked me a really, really great question recently, and you said, what do you know? What do you know? What do you know about past experiences? What do you know about going forward? What is stopping you, preventing you from going there?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, my mind blow. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a great question to sit on and with in that moment. Because, life can seem so scary, so uncertain. So I don't know what I should do in times of that, right? Well, what do you know?
Yep. Yeah. I love that. Yes. Because honestly, the truth is, and take it from a girl who's been searching for the truth her whole freaking life, I don't think any of us truly know it.
Yeah.
And so if I don't know it and Eric doesn't know it and the president doesn't know it, you don't have to feel bad for not knowing either. And all you're really doing in every moment is taking your best guess. And really your intuition is that instinctual guess that just comes from you. And I think so many of us have learned through, society and education, sometimes to second guess ourselves, especially if we don't fit in with the mold of what schooling looks like nowadays. And we maybe don't get the best grade, and that makes us feel like for some reason there's something wrong with us. When really that schooling is just a construct around you, and no spirit can fit into a construct because we're all infinite. So I love that you brought that up. It's such a quick and easy thing to do. Anytime you're feeling anxiety or fear, and you can even write it down if you need to. Sometimes my clients will wake up with really bad anxiety about what they have for the day. And what I'll recommend is write down all the things that you're anxious about. Write down what you don't know, right? Because that's the anxious thoughts. It's the loop of what I don't know, what I don't know, what I don't know, what I don't know. Then look at it and change it to writing what you do know. And that can be so grounding and anxiety relieving and so quick and easy. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what a great way to kind of segue into exiting out. Unfortunately, because our time is running out. I don't know about you, Kendra, but I'm thinking there's going to have to be a part 2 here because this has been so amazing. We've got great comments coming in from all over the world. So thank you guys for tuning in. Huge thank you to you, Kendra. And your time of being on the show with me. This has been absolutely awesome and amazing. To reach out to Kendra, you can find her on social media at Breakthrough Balance. Did I say that right? Is there anything I'm missing on there?
Nope.
Breakthrough Balance. And for me, you can find me on Energetic Life Now, which is on Facebook. You can find me there. You can also find me on Instagram at life_coach_Eric, ERIC. In our part 2 coming up, Kendra, I think we'll be looking to get into kind of, we tapped into the whole scope of kind of where you were up into your early teens. And I think in the next pieces, I think we should probably kind of get into the teen years, right? Because what our listeners don't realize is, holy moly, on the other side of those teen years is an incredible journey that you have taken that has gotten you here today. And I think we can squeeze in another couple minutes. If you're good, I'm good. And I'd love to just talk a couple minutes about those teen years and getting into that space, if we will.
Definitely. Yes, I would love to. And I can't wait to come back. I think that that's a great question to kind of bring into what the differences in my teen years were. And I would say one of the biggest proponents for me there is connecting back with what we were just talking about, and the fact that because of some of the constructs in society, we start to learn or start to perceive that we're lacking things because we maybe don't fit in with that perfect cookie cutter A+ in every subject box. Right. And I know that you can share on this too, Eric. So I want to hear your perspective on this next. But as I kind of obviously was in my later teen years, I went to therapy, and that was hugely helpful. And eventually, after about a year and a half of therapy, my therapist kind of gave me like the okay, she's okay to go to college. Like, we feel good about that. We feel okay about that. And my parents were like, phew, okay, awesome, sounds good. And when I got to college, I would say one of the most transformative parts of those years was really moving to a different place, being in a liberal arts part of the college. I went to University of Nevada, Reno, and just seeing when you get into college that people get to choose who they want to be. They don't have to be everything. They don't have to be good at math and science and this and that and fit into the box. You don't have to fit into a box anymore when you get into college. You get to choose, oh, I actually love art. I'm going to pursue that. Or I actually love science. I'm going to pursue that. And then even when you get into those topics, there's like even more millions of threads of things that you can be. Like, it's truly infinite and sometimes overwhelming. But the amazing part of it was that I learned it's okay to be different.
Yeah.
And it's okay that my story has some dark parts to it. One thing that I absolutely loved, because I love art, is that, you know, some of the most creative artists in the world have gone mad or have been mad.
Yes.
And so, you know, maybe it's not the worst thing.
Totally.
But really, on a realistic level, I think just moving out of being in kind of a systematized upbringing and kind of getting that freedom and a taste of what else is out there in the world, you learn that there's so much more opportunity for you, and that so many people are so different all around, and it's okay if you don't fit into that box, or if you didn't get an A in science or whatever it was. And that didn't mean that you're lacking by any means. It just meant that you didn't fit into the box, which is actually a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think giving kids the permission to be okay with who they are, I think is a huge gift. I know with my 3 kids, I know Jen and I got to that place where we kind of did that. Listen, what do you want? And then giving them that support they needed to kind of move forward and to overcome, to become. You know, they're going through trials and situational things that were bringing them down, and then be able to just be there and to support, you know, as best we could. Listen, there is no such thing as a perfect parent out there, and if you know where they are, send them my way, because I want to talk to them and find out what they're doing, because you know, parents are going to mess up all the time. We do. It's just part of the nature of who we are, and we try not to. And we try to, you know, be the best that we can be for our kids, but we're gonna fall into some traps, you know, ourselves, right? But this is where, you know, as a family unit, you out there, viewers, you guys can set up their structures around your family for safety. Set up the structures that you guys can share openly and be supportive and be there for each other. And those are the things that really build that strong cohesiveness within a family unit, right? I mean, you were saying, you know, I felt all alone. I was all by myself. I felt like I was going through this alone, and it wasn't until, you know, finally mom realized, as you were saying, and then the support and everything came in, and you came out the other side okay.
Definitely. Yeah. I was going to make a joke, and I was going to say, hey, Eric, are you saying that parents are also just humans? But like, yeah, of course, no one is ever going to be perfect. And that's something, that's a realization too, right? Like becoming a kid and realizing, oh, my parent isn't like an angel or a superhuman. They're just a human. They're just a normal human.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think I was that kid that didn't fit into the box, right? And I don't think I still don't think I fit into any kind of box or mold or anything of that nature. I mean, you ask my kids, I mean, they're just like, oh my word, like this is our dad, this is who we have. Oh my gosh, right? and you know, bless them. They're fantastic, and I love them. And
Yeah.
but I think it's coming to the grips with, or the understanding, the realization, the epiphany of,
Mhm.
you don't have to be perfect,
Yeah.
and know and make allowances for yourself and for
Mhm.
others. And I think that's where that real cohesiveness comes in, right? I mean, I remember with our oldest son, him in the car with me and breaking down, going through a tough time and crying. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You hate me. I know you do. This sucks so bad. I can't believe I'm doing this to you. And I just remember just grabbing onto him and just saying, listen, you need to understand, there is nothing that you can ever do that is going to take away my love for you. Nothing. And to have him just you could just feel the tension just leave his body, and he just collapsed right into my arms and continued just sobbing. And it's like, what what is going on that we have to be in that space and place to have to say that? And I'm calling myself out as a parent, right? What did I not do to help be supportive of that? What did I do that was too supportive? It is so hard to be in that balancing act of life, if you will, to
Yeah.
know what the right thing to do is and where.
Mhm.
But just knowing that in those moments, that's where we come together in a way that um, is gonna save their life, if you will, right?
Wow. Mhm. Oh, Eric, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, and I love that so much, because when I hear that story, what I hear is, in your son's moment of pain, um, you didn't try and distract him from it by telling him how amazing these other things are over there, which I think is a common thing that we can do with our friends and loved ones, because we just want them to
Yeah.
feel better.
Yeah.
What you did was you connected to his and your oneness. You connected to what makes you the same, which is our humanness and the fact that we all experience pain, and it is part of the human experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that you bring that up, because thinking about our conversation today, I really think that that's a powerful takeaway, because I know that my parents didn't show as much of their pain in their own personal experiences, because they wanted me to not be clouded to the pains of life too early, right? And of course, it's always going to come back to that balance. And I do believe that the more we can finesse in this thread of showing our little humans how amazing the world is, and also showing them when, hey, mommy and daddy we're in a little bit of pain right now. You know,
Yeah.
someone hurt our feelings, and that doesn't feel good. That hurts our human hearts. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to, because we're spirits, we're going to relate to that person who hurt us and know that they must be hurting as well. We're going to do a little pattern interrupt, if that's what it is, or whatever tool you use.
Right.
Showing
Right.
that to your child can be so helpful. So then when they get to that stage, they know that the pain is okay, and that they can work through it and come to the other side and have that role model who's doing that with them throughout their lives.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So if there's something that we could encourage the listeners on, as we close out here, is and I'm going to go with what you just said, is finding that oneness. Where in your own relationship and the relationships that you have with others, how can you create more of that positive space oneness? And as you come back next time, hopefully our listeners will be able to share out their celebrations. Kendra, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure to have you here. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check them out at spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, live it. Thanks you guys so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thank